This is part one of a three-part series that the Houndsman XP Podcast is bringing you about something that is so vitally important. It's a tragedy, it's a crime, and we are going to talk about having a hunting hound criminally shot. In this three-part series, we are going to talk to a victim, we're going to talk to a state police detective, and we are going to talk to a prosecuting attorney. This series is all about preparing you in the event that such a tragedy happens. The victim will share his story, the emotional roller coaster that he was on when this tragedy struck. The detective will tell you key things that you need to do in order to assist in a successful investigation. And finally, the prosecutor will explain the system, how it works, and how you can assist your local prosecutor in getting a successful prosecution and restitution for the loss of your hound. In this first part of our three-part series, I am joined by Brad Hall. Brad had two of his hounds shot in one evening while he was out coon hunting with his father. One of the hounds did not survive. Brad goes into great detail. You can still hear the emotion in his voice decades after this occurred, but he's going to walk you through how he handled the situation. You should take note of this. It's spot on. He did the right things. He was well prepared in advance to handle this sort of situation. You're not going to want to miss this episode or any of the other two episodes that go along with it. I hope you never experience this. I've been involved with many of these cases from an advisory standpoint and was with another hunter one time when his squirrel dog was shot. It is a traumatic experience. It is chaotic when this happens. By following the steps that we're going to lay out for you, you are going to be able to approach this situation with a calmness and an understanding that will help ensure that you get a successful prosecution and ultimately you get justice for the crime that was committed against you. Let's get down to it. The Old South dog box is rocking. Let's drop the tailgate. It's time to dump the box. So here we are at the Houndsman XP Base Camp in Bear Branch, Indiana, and I've got my good friend, Brad Hall. Brad, we have been, how long have we known each other?
Well, let's see. I first met you in Vincennes University back in 1992. So,
man, we are dating ourselves.
Yeah.
We're old.
Yep.
But this is going to be, the reason I wanted to have you on here, Brad, is because we're talking about dog shootings. We're talking about the everything that goes into that. I don't know if this is it's going to be the first part. You'll be the first part of this series, this three-part series on having our hounds shot, and that has been a deal where seems to be epidemic at times. It goes in spurts. And you'll see a lot of stories coming out about having these hounds shot. And I think a lot of times people misunderstand what is actually going on there, especially houndsmen. You know, they fail to realize that this is a criminal case. And you went through the whole thing. You went through the whole thing. And you were a director at the time for the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance?
Yes.
And you experienced this whole thing. And I remember vividly you calling me that night and telling me that you had a hound shot. And I'm not sure where I was in the process of that whole thing, but we talked about all of it. And so.
Well, yeah. What's so funny about it was just less than 2 weeks ago, I believe. This is in September 2009, and the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance was just kicked off their "Don't Shoot My Dog" campaign. I think the law came into effect probably that year or the year before that it is now a Class D felony to shoot and kill a domesticated animal.
Mm-hmm.
And so HTDA, Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance, they kicked off the Don't Shoot My Dog campaign with posters and trying to get that information out to people and everything. And one of the programs that we got invited to at the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance was the new incoming recruits for the Indiana Conservation Officers Plainfield Academy invited us to bring some of our dogs and role play dog shooting situation. One of the role play was what to do if a homeowner shoots our dogs, and then the conservation officers they trained with us in a real play scenario, and then they reversed it. In other words, how the homeowner supposed to respond when a coon hunter becomes irate with them. And so we just had that training at the Plainfield Police Academy with the incoming recruits. And so
let me give you a little backstory on that.
Go ahead.
So that whole thing was all set up through the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance. I was actually working as a conservation officer at the time. I don't think I was a drill instructor for that recruit class. I can't remember for sure. I did a bunch of classes, but one of the things that I always wanted to see happen was our officers be exposed to that sort of a situation, because we had spent so many years as an agency misrepresenting or not understanding coon hunters and things like that. And of course, I was a coon hunter and a houndsman coming into recruit training. And when I was a recruit, I remember the jokes. When they knew that I was a coon hunter, it was, do you know how a coon hunter's lying? When his mouth's moving. And the jokes just kept coming and poking and different things. So after I got a few years on, I realized that this was a segment of our sporting public that was misunderstood by everybody, including the people that were supposed to be enforcing the laws that regulated what we did, who we are, and what we do. And so we had Chris Griggs. He was a state trooper. He was there. Chris Griggs, his dad was Vanny Griggs. You remember Vanny?
Oh, yeah, the silver fox.
Oh, yeah, Vanny. And so Chris was there, and we set up these scenarios, and it was a training day for us to get these recruits in the most realistic situations we could get them in to deal with everything from hunters trespassing to, it was scenario, it was role playing. Mm-hmm. And you were there and Chris was there. Chris was a homeowner, and I mean, it was great.
Right.
It was a good deal.
Yeah.
So we had that training. I'd forgotten about this, that you had been there so recently.
Yep. It was just like within 10 days.
Yeah. And so at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, there's a little house off to the side.
Yep.
That they use for scenario-based training, different stuff. And we set the whole thing up with the land. Had a role player there that was a landowner, and he was irate, and then the officer is supposed to walk into this situation or respond to this call to a conflict between a landowner and a coon hunter, and then it was a landowner who had shot a coon hunter's dog, and it just all boiled up from there.
Yeah. So, I had a dog named Banjo that I owned in half ownership with the great Mike Dahoney, out of Dahoney Dizzy. Banjo was qualified for the PKC World Hunt. I just recently qualified him for the UKC World Hunt, and so I asked my dad if he would like to go with me that night. He had a female, and I told him I was going to take Banjo, and we had another dog that we named Remus, and my dad's middle name is Remus, so I named the dog after my dad. I called him Remus.
I bet he was honored.
Oh, yeah. And so
Albert Remus?
Yep, Albert
Hall.
Remus Hall, yes.
Yeah.
And so of course, Dad loved to coon hunt. He's never been a competition hunter, but my dad being raised in the southeastern Kentucky in the coal mining field of Whitesburg, Kentucky, him and his best friend Donald Wagner, they grew up coon hunting and just outside of Whitesburg in Mayking and Pine Mountain. And so those traditions were passed on to me. So I've been coon hunting since I was old enough to crawl on my daddy's back, and fell in love with it, and that's all I ever lived and dreamed for, is to run them coon dogs. And so me and Dad, we got together to go coon hunting, and we went to the place where we had permission. It's in Pittsboro. It's a farm that I still hunt. Nice patch woods, a little thicket in it, cornfield, bean field on both sides with a creek running through the middle. Perfect place to train your young dogs and make a quick drop, have a coon. Well, they hit a track. Corn was up, and they hit a track. Instead of going into the wood, this coon went on the backside of the cornfield, and all of a sudden took a line drive back towards a strip of houses. Now, we're not talking a housing edition. We're talking about like 5 homes that owned about 15, 20 acres apiece, something like that.
Sure.
And so
it's pretty common in Indiana. You know, you have these big farms, and then along the county roads, the farming family had sold off parcels of land, and people built houses along these county roads.
That's right. And so I'm following the dogs on my GPS, and I can see by their tracks that they're heading back toward the wood that I figured that the coon was going to head to. So I told Dad, I said, let's jump in the truck and we'll try to cut them off. And so we pulled in front of the wood where I figured the dogs were going to take the coon and come across to another patch woods. And as we pulled up, we heard a pop, 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 pop. And my dad said, son, he said, that sounded like a gunshot. And I said, man, I hope nobody shot my dogs. And so as we got out of the truck, I dropped the tailgate and hoping that my dogs will come to me. And sure enough, 2 of them did. Remus came, and I threw him in the box, and the female came, and I threw her in the box. Because the popping sound was a real loud type gun. It's not like a normal 22, and so the pistol going off, I figured would probably mess the dogs up. And so Banjo didn't come, and I started calling for him. And so I started walking toward the nearest house from where the 2 dogs came. I started walking toward that house, and my dad walked with me, and I'm shining for my dog. And the house sits off the road probably about 50 yards, and underneath the street light of the house, I seen a man holding a pistol. And I said, buddy, you better not have shot my coon dog. He said, I did, and over there it lays. And I looked over, and I could see the red light flashing on the GPS collar, the Garmin collar, and it wasn't moving. Chris, it's the only time in my life where I felt needles from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes. I mean, literally needles. And I started screaming, and my dad grabbed a hold of me. And he yelled at the homeowner. He said, please go in the house. I don't know how long I can hold it. And I said, Dad, I'm fine. I'm not going to do nothing. I'm not going to do nothing. And Dad let go of me. And that homeowner went into the house. And I stood right there on the road. And I said, I can't believe this just happened. And so one of the things that I knew to do is not say a thing to the homeowner. At that point, it does no good at that point. After the scenario happened, it's over. So I called the police on my cell phone, called 911. They sent a sheriff deputy to me.
Let's hold up there a minute.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
So what made you think you never entered the property?
No, sir. Never even thought to.
When you heard the gunshots, you didn't go running in there. What was your total interaction with this homeowner The guy that you saw under the light at the time that it happened?
The only thing I said, you better not have shot my coon dogs.
And that's all you said
That's
at
all
the
I
time?
said.
And his response was, I sure did.
I sure did. There, he's laying over there.
And did you, at that time, did you just think that Banjo was dead? Or
I did. I thought Banjo was dead. And I started screaming just like, oh my God, and that's when my dad grabbed a hold of him, because Dad thought I would take off after the landowner.
Sure.
And so he's being a father. And so, like I said, I called 911, called the sheriff, and then I called you.
Yeah.
And Chris, if I remember correctly, you said Brad called Jeff Wells now.
Well, I gave you the number for dispatch.
Yeah. And
I think I called dispatch. I actually called dispatch and said, hey, this is what's going on. Here's the number. And Jeff, if Jeff's working, then have him respond or get a conservation officer there.
And so Jeff Wells is our conservation officer for that county, and he was not working that night. And so after I realized he wasn't working, I remembered that I had his number in my phone. I think this is the important part that I'd like to share with coon hunters, is to develop a relationship with your local conservation officer.
Let's touch on that. We'll touch on that again, but Go ahead and finish.
And so I went ahead and I called Jeff on his personal phone, and Jeff answered. And I told him what happened. And, he wasn't on duty. But Jeff, out of the goodness of his heart and being the good conservation officer he came to the scene. And he said, do not tell the sheriff deputy that I'm coming. He wanted to be the investigator. He wanted to take over. And so when the sheriff came there, in all reality, when the sheriff's like, well, sorry about your dog. So had I stuck with the deputy, I probably wouldn't have had the full investigation that needed to be done. Had Jeff Wells, have I not got Jeff Wells there? And so that's another thing that I learned from it, is our COs are put in place for these situations, and that 99% of your deputies have no clue.
Well, and I'm going to take up for law enforcement in general, but sheriff's deputies are dealing with a lot of different things, and for them to show up and respond to that, if they're not familiar with the laws, and in the state of Indiana, it's simply this is the point that I want to make before we get any farther, is I don't care if you're in Indiana or you're in Ohio or you're in Wyoming, because, we cover all of it. When somebody denies you your property and they take it from you, there is a law that covers that. Doesn't have to be a law on the books that says, we see it all the time, to shoot a hunting dog in the state of whatever is a felony. Well, it's always a crime, whether it's your cow, whether it's your dog, whether it's your car, whether it's your your chainsaw the back of your truck. There's a law that covers that because it's yours, and we live in America, and your property is protected. So when a law enforcement officer tells you that there's nothing they can do because it's a hunting dog, that's wrong. It's just property is all it is. And so for houndsmen out there, they need to recognize the fact that there has always been a crime that has been committed, or the potential for a crime to be committed, when a dog is shot. So, and I'm not trying to let anybody off the hook, but I also want to. There are a lot of houndsmen, a lot of coon hunters out there who are also city police officers and state troopers, and county deputies and different things. And this is something that is, if that person has no understanding of that kind of culture, then automatically they're like, they don't know what happens. And I can tell you as a law enforcement officer, when I responded to things that I didn't fully understand the law or I didn't understand what was going on, then ego kicks in. I don't care who you are. You know, it's just like the Facebook post. It's like that says, by God, if somebody shot my dog, I'm going to do this. Probably you're not. That's all ego. That's all, you know, kicking in. And law enforcement officers aren't exempt from that. So when they show up to a scene like you showed up to, and it's like, man, I'm not sure that this is a crime, then they automatically try to minimize it. And the famous last words are, looks like a civil case. You know, you'll have to take a civil case. But Jeff understood that, and Jeff Wells is a guy that was well equipped. You couldn't have had a better officer respond.
Right. So Jeff shows up at the scene, and he's just a cool dude. I mean, he's a cool cat. He knows how to, you know, he just went real smooth with everything, and he showed up at the scene and, you know, apologized, told me he's sorry that my dog was shot, and he said, Brad, he said, was your other dog shot? I said, well, Jeff, I didn't even think about that. And so we pulled the dog out, inspected him, and sure enough, Remus was shot in the back. I said, oh,
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
I really hadn't until you told me tonight.
Yeah, and so I'm like, doggone it. And so first thing that Jeff does is go to the landowner, and he comes back to me after talking to the landowner, and he said, Brad, he said, your dog's still breathing. He said, I want you to go get him right now. And so I go over there, and my dog just laying there, unconscious but still breathing, with a bullet hole perfectly placed in between his eyeballs. I mean, perfect. And I picked my dog up, and shaking uncontrollably. I just couldn't believe this was happening. And I told Jeff I'm rushing my dog to the vet. So we go to the Avon Animal Clinic, getting there, and we get the Remus in there, and he does a quick x-ray on Banjo, and said that you can see here, Brad, the bullet's placed firmly in his brain. He said there's nothing we can do for him. He said he's going to die, but we can take care of that right now. So I went ahead and said my goodbye to him, and they put him to sleep. And so he took my other dog, Remus, and they had to go into surgery on him to get the bullet out. In the meantime, I called Purdue University. I really can't remember who told me to do this. I can't remember if it was. I can't recall. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead and tell the story.
And so I called Purdue University and told them that I got a dog I'm coming in with that was shot and killed. I need to have an autopsy report and ballistic testing. And so I rushed into Purdue University, which is a good hour drive from where I was at. And when I got there, what I was shocked was you think that they're going to do their thing, give you your dog back. They said once they take that dog, you don't get him back. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't able to even get my dog back to bury him. They don't tell you what they do with them, but once you turn it over to them, you don't get that dog back. So Banjo went out a Boilermaker. So anyways, I go back to the Avon Animal Clinic and pick my other dog up. They were able to get the bullet out and stitched him up. And so I go home, and what's really shocking is the amount of support from coon hunters from all over calling me. You know how they want to be. Whatever you say to do, Brad, we'll do it. I'm like, hey, it'll all be taken care of. I said, I trust the system now. I trust the system. And so Jeff Wells got a hold of me, and he said, Brad, he said, this is going to take time. He said, there's not going to be nothing suddenly done. He said, I got a full statement from the landowner, and he said, I'm going to wait for the reports from Purdue University veterinarian, and he said, it's just going to take time, so you're just going to have to sit and be patient and wait, you know.
I think that's a good place to talk about a couple things there. So, yeah, it's when you have a dog taken in, it's called a necropsy, and you and I was talking to Jeff Wells that night. I was talking to you that night. And the next day, I'd come up to your house.
Yes, you did. You interviewed with the news center. We had channels.
Yep.
6, 8, 59. I mean, it got blown. You know.
And this is the part that I want to lay out: how to be effective. Because I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit, but you got a successful prosecution out of this case, and you got restitution for Banjo.
Yes.
And Remus.
Yes. And
for
Remus.
both of them.
Yes.
So that's where I want to tell people you need to hang in there and listen to this story about how the system can work. And I want to talk about how we make it successful and how we can do things to ensure that that's successful. But I think some things that we can talk about already is the fact that you remained as calm as possible at the time. You had contacts with the right people, not because you were desperate. It's because you had spent your whole life making these contacts. And you started to talk about why it was important to have that good relationship. And we call them conservation officers in Indiana, but it's a game warden, you know. And so talk about that,
Right.
Brad.
So I met Jeff Wells, our game warden in Hendricks County, years ago, before that ever happened. And there had been a few times where he'd show up when we were coon hunting, and he'd check your license, and you know, and check their license. But I'd see him at the barber shop. We'd always fellowship and talk, and I'd see him in town. He would always making time for me, and I'd making time for him, and where we had that, once we see each other, that friendship relationship. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? What, you know? And so, you know, that built over the years, and where you start developing that kind of relationship. And you know, one of the things that I always realized growing up is the game warden isn't against the hunter; he's for the hunter. That's who pays his paycheck. So you know, the hunter that's worried about the game warden, the hunter that's not doing what he's supposed to do. So, you know, so I encourage everybody to start developing that relationship, you know, and that way he trusts you enough to give you his personal cell phone number, you know, and he did. He trusted me with it. And so having that, I didn't realize I'd have to use it for that matter.
Right.
But that was good. And so to pick back up where we were at, the next day, I was shocked to get a phone call from the man that shot my dog's wife, begging me to drop all this, asking me, please don't, you know, because she was saying that he was trying to protect me. He was trying to protect me.
He was trying to protect his wife.
He was trying to protect his wife. So here's what the story was that came out. Maybe jumping ahead of myself here, but
I'll rein you back in.
Okay. So the landowner told our game warden, Jeff Wells, that he heard some dogs outside, and he had a dog, I think it was a Labrador Retriever, that he let run loose in his yard. Mm-hmm. And he said that my dog came into his yard and attacked his dog and had him pinned down. That all three of my dogs were pinned down. So he said he shot the pistol in the air twice to scare my dogs off his dogs. And you know as well as I do, coon dogs are pretty friendly dogs. I mean, I've never seen coon dog go up to another dog and just take another dog down, especially mine. And Banjo was this meek. As a matter of fact, we used Banjo at the police academy as one of the instruction dogs. So, you know, and so he's a very mild, meek dog. The thing about Banjo, whenever you called Banjo or you yell at him, he would immediately just get on all fours and lay down and look at you. He won't move until you go up to him and snatch him up. Yeah. So I know what happened. Landon comes out. He said that my dog had his dog down and attacking it, and he shoots 2 times in the air. And when he did, he said that Banjo come running after him with his hackles up.
Right.
Okay. And that's why he said that he took a gun outside because he didn't want them dogs to hurt his wife.
Mm-hmm.
But yet his wife wasn't home at the time. The wife showed up after the game warden showed up.
Right.
And he said, well, I didn't know when she'd get home. I just wanted them gone when she got home. I wanted to protect her. And so the story that he told Jeff Wells was that the dog come running, charging at him with his hackles up after he shot 2 times in the air. The other 2 dogs took off running. And when Banjo started running towards him with his hackles up, he feared for his life and shot the dog. And Jeff said, what would you use in a 38 snub nose? He said, how far away was he? He said, about 20 yards, 30 feet, 20 yards, something like that. And Jeff said, you was able to place a perfect bullet between that dog's eyeballs on the run with his hackles up in the dark with the 38 snub nose. He said, that's good shooting. And
like so world-class shooting.
Yeah. And so, but I know exactly what happened because I know my dog. When he got yelled at, he immediately went down on all 4 legs, like in a lay-down position.
We had him cornered in a chain link yard, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah. He was in a corner of the chain link yard. It wasn't like he can go anywhere. And I suspected that he walked right up and shot the dog point blank between the eyeballs.
Right.
So Jeff Wells asked him, game warden asked him, he said, now, you see that red blinking light on that collar? He said, did you not think maybe the dog is of some importance? And the landowner said that he thought the red light flashing meant danger. That it was a dangerous dog. He didn't know why that red light was flashing on that dog.
Mm-hmm.
So
because this was the old days of Garmin, like the very first 220.
Yep.
And so those old collars, the light blinked red. Yep. It didn't blink green like the new TT15s and T5s.
So this would be a good time to let everyone know that anybody that's got a Garmin collar out there, you can download and print the whole track of every hunt and print it off on paper.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're going to put that in here.
All right.
Yeah.
So, anyways, the landowner gave him that story, and when we got the results back from Purdue University, the ballistic testing said that the dog was shot no farther than 3 foot away with powder burn still on his forehead, and that it was put in at an angle of 17 degrees, 17-degree angle. He told Jeff Wells the dog was 30 foot away or 20 yards away, whatever, and that he shot at a 90-degree angle with the dog running at him at a full run.
Mm-hmm.
So we had that evidence. So I'm so glad that I took my dog to Purdue to have the ballistic testing and the autopsy done.
Yeah, so to lay this out, I mean, when you talk about a 17-degree angle, okay, so think of it as a clock, and 12 o'clock would be 0 degrees, and then like at 2 o'clock, that would be about 17 degrees, a little less than 2 o'clock.
Right.
So that's pretty much standing over and shooting straight down.
Yep.
And so that's key to the success of this story.
Yes.
There's several keys that you've already covered. One is having the relationship. One is having the right person there to investigate the case. And the other thing that you did right was getting that dog for an actual forensics examination called a necropsy at Purdue University. So now you've got all these parts coming together in this case, and that's how those were all key things that you needed to do.
Yeah, and a couple of things that we did do, Purdue University and my veterinarian that worked on Remus, was I requested on both dogs to find any hair or foreign object or foreign hair from the so-called Labrador Retriever that they said that my dog had down and chewing up.
Right.
There was none found, zero found. There was no, and Jeff Wells, or game warden, he investigated the dog. He said, "I want to see your dog," and he brought the dog out, and he said it was perfectly healthy, fine, no wet marks on it, no visible altercation, the wet marks were, so Jeff was real thorough in asking all the right questions, and recording all this. Mm-hmm. And so, we had the evidence of Jeff's investigation, the autopsy, the ballistic testing, the foreign objects not being found, or any other hair from dogs in the dog's mouth. So a lot of things were put in the right place. And, speaking the next day, and I greatly appreciate your friendship, Chris, that you drove up 2.5 hours that next day to be my spokesman for all the news channels that showed up to investigate this, because at this point it was on channel 59, 68 news.
Yeah, all of them.
And so I'll let you speak on that, how you shared as a conservation officer.
Well, I think I was probably there as the spokesman for the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance at that point. Jeff was covering the conservation officer side of it.
That's right.
And one of the things that we felt was going to add to success was to give a news release on what actually happened. And let people know what coon hunting actually is, and talk about the temperament of these hounds. And they're not bloodthirsty killers. They're not dogs that coon hunters, houndsmen. I don't care if you're a coon hunter, you're a rabbit hunter with beagles, you're a bear hunter with bear dogs. Aggressive dogs are not tolerated in our community. Dog aggression is something that's not tolerated. And so we wanted to get that information out there and talk about that to the general public, because it was an opportunity. It was a tragedy for you, no doubt about it, Brad, but it was also an opportunity for us as a hound hunting community to inform the person that is sitting in their living room in a suburb of Greenwood, Indiana, to know what coon hunting is all about and what being a houndsman is all about. And so that's the message that we tried to get out there with this news release.
That's right. I remember that now.
Yep. And Jeff talked about as much as he could. I mean, he talked, there's certain things that you can talk about and certain things you can't when there's an investigation ongoing. But Jeff is very well spoken. He's very deliberate, and you can ask for a better officer to be there that night for sure.
Yeah, it was good. So, anyways, when the homeowner's wife called me, it was sort of, I would say, not so much at her harassing me as she was in fear. She realized that, shouldn't have happened, shouldn't have been done. And so there was a part of me that was sad for her, because now her husband getting all this attention.
A lot of uncertainty there for her. I mean, she's on the outside looking in. She comes home, and there's policemen in her driveway, and all this stuff's going on, and she's like, what is going on? What have you done? And after going in the house and talking to her husband, it's like, uh-oh, this could be bad.
Yeah.
So she reaches out to you.
Yeah. And Chris, I never shared this I don't think I ever shared this with you. But come to find out, he was a well-respected man in a church.
Mm-hmm.
He was a missionary. And so, you know that I'm a Christian. I love the Lord. I know you're a Christian too. So there was a big part of me that really struggled with that. You know, he had a gun and he used it, and he made a mistake. And I know that his story didn't line up to what really happened, but there was still a part of me that would, you know, that sensible side or sensitive side.
The human side.
Yeah, the human side. But
compassion.
Right, compassion. But it is what it is. And you know, we had to proceed with it. And I had other people, other Christians that reached out to me and said, "Oh, you shouldn't be, you know, suing your fellow brother in Christ." I said, "I'm not." "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "I'm not suing him." I said, "There's an investigation being done because it was a criminal offense. Mm-hmm. That's out of my hands." And that's what people fail to realize.
Yeah.
And so just wanted to throw that out there.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, I think, you know, you look at that whole thing, it's like a compassionate person looks at the other side of it and they think, what would I have done in this situation? You know, and we can never speak as to what this man's motives were. I think it was a lack of education about who we are as houndsmen, which is, whose fault is that? That's our fault. It really is. I mean, when you get right down to the nitty-gritty of it, why doesn't this guy know that a coonhound is non-aggressive? He's not a threat to you. That's our fault as a hunting community, because we have not done our jobs to get out there in front of the public and say and state who we are and what we do, and that's our deal. But his fault is taking those steps and shooting your dog. Yeah. So we can accept our responsibility in it, but he needs to accept his too, and every action has consequences. You know, it's just what it is.
Now, I will tell you this. It's pretty funny because he's a very smart individual, and he had a lot of, at that time, he computer savvy. Mm-hmm. He started a website like within 2 weeks called HoosierTreeDog.com. He mocked us, hoping that anybody that goes to Hoosier Tree Dog would put HoosierTreeDog.com instead of Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance,
right.
.org,
right?
Which we were.
Yeah.
And if you went to that Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance.com, then he's sharing his story.
Why he did what he would. He was just trying to make excuses.
Right.
All right. So this podcast is about helping people out there who, I hope nobody ever has to experience this. Right. How did you feel about it? I mean, you were. I know when you called me, you were highly emotional. But
like I said, I never felt to this day needles that ran from my head.
What does that mean? What do you mean needles?
I was in shock. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it happened, you know. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, Banjo was a very, very good competition coon dog. And I was really, really disappointed because I lost out on that. Mm-hmm. But, man, I'm going to tell you something. There's a brighter side to everything. I mean, if you trust in the Lord that all things work for his good. Mike Mahoney came to me in the midst of this. By that January, and that was in November when the guy got arrested and stuff, and I didn't have a coon dog. And so Mike Mahoney came to me, and he said, "Brad," he said, "I'm going to give you half interest in this pup that I got. He's a year old. He's out of Mahoney Dizzy." And he said, I'm going to give him to you. You don't have to pay me half interest or anything. And he said, let's try to start over for you. And pup never been in the woods. And, of Chris, I showed the pup a coon and got him barking on a coon a little bit in the woods during kill season. And I'll never forget, we went coon hunting the next night, and this pup never been trained. I went coon hunting the next night, and we're out there talking, and about 200 yards in the woods, we hear a dog load up on a tree. I'm like, somebody else coon hunting in these woods tonight? And he said, man, I said, let's go see whose dog that is. And I go in there, and that's my dog, Rock.
Yeah.
And I finished him out. He was a Grand Night champion, PKC champion, HTX. Best coon dog I ever owned in my life. I ended up buying Mike Mahoney's half out on him. And so I would have never had Rock if it wasn't for what happened to Banjo.
Yeah.
And so, the silver lining in that.
Yep. Well, let me ask you this. So what do you think the things are, and that's an amazing story. That's amazing. And I agree with you 100%. Things happen for a reason, and it's out of our control, and it's not always something that we understand. But what sort of things do you feel like happened that night? What are some things that you did that was successful? Because let's just skip ahead here a little bit. Okay, the investigation was complete. You went to court. The man was put on trial. And what happened during the trial?
Okay. To answer your first question, I think the number one thing I did was keep a cool head.
Mm-hmm.
As bad as I wanted to run over there, I knew that wasn't the answer. And so keeping a cool head and realizing at that point there's nothing that you can do to reverse it.
And Albert probably helped you with that.
And Dad did.
Dad
did. and so I'm glad Dad was there for support.
I'm glad he was there for you too.
Yeah. So Jeff Wells gets with me and said they got all the information that they needed, that they were going to arrest the shooter.
And how long after?
Oh my goodness, that was like a month.
Okay.
3-4 weeks.
So how did you feel from the time that was that night until you got word that he was going to be arrested?
I almost felt.
Do you feel like it was being swept under the rug?
I did. I almost felt hopeless. I'm like, man, nothing's going to come of this.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's going to come of this.
Did you do anything between that time and the time that he was arrested?
I did exactly what Jeff Wells told me to do. Not make no contact at all with that landowner.
Did you stay in contact with the prosecutor or with the officer?
I think the prosecutor reached out to me a couple of times to ask me some questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have the best vocabulary. What do they call it when something's settled? It's called a percentage, or when
disposition?
Not percentage. In other words, when something is established in court, anybody
a precedent.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, precedent.
Right. Well, like I said, my vocabulary is not the best.
That's all right.
But anyway, that was one of the things that I honestly think that Jeff was hoping to get.
Set of precedents. And what that means is, okay, we're going to establish in the state of Indiana, we've never had a case like this where it was a successful prosecution on specifically a coonhound being shot, but this is an opportunity for us to get a conviction on this, and it sets a precedence for all future cases. And I can tell you that your case has been a precedence for other cases when other dogs have been shot, because anyone that I knew of and was involved in, it's like, hey, we've already done this. It's already been established in Hendricks County, Indiana, that this is wrong. It's a crime, and this is the case. And they've got a cause number. They can go and look it up and read the case notes, and bang, there's your precedence.
Yep. That's exactly right. And so, yeah, the prosecutor reached out to me a couple times, and I was feeling hopeless. I'm like, man. So I was pretty shocked when Jeff Wells called me and said they're getting ready to arrest him, and they are filing Class D felony charges for killing a domesticated animal and 2 Class A misdemeanors of shooting a domesticated animal for shooting him and shooting Remus. So there were 3 charges, Class D felony, 2 Class A misdemeanors. And so they gave him the opportunity. He ended up turning himself in. He went.
Right.
They processed him, arrested him, processed him, went through that process, and from that point, it went on till April, where they were going to set a trial, and basically, it was cut and dry with the ballistic testing report and his testimony versus not having the dog hair in the dog's mouth, and Jeff Wells not seeing any of the visual that the dog was actually, the landowner's dog was taken down. And I want to say something here. The landowner kept talking about, he said, you guys shouldn't have your dogs free casted out here running in the whole, oh, wait a minute, your dog running free in your yard, same difference.
Right.
I'm sure I've had some of the neighbors tell me how his dog went over and getting their trash and stuff.
Right.
And so, so the prosecutor continued to work with the landowner's attorney. And basically it was cut and dry, Chris. I mean, he goes before a trial, he's going to get slammed. And that's a Class D felony.
Right.
So the prosecutor done a plea bargain with him. And that plea bargain was that he had to pay restitution of Banjo of $8,000 and to pay me back $1,509 for the ballistic testing, the autopsy, and putting Banjo to sleep and putting Remus under to remove the bullet and the stitches. And so that plea agreement was settled upon and agreed upon. He would have 365 days probation. 365 days jail time, 364 days suspended. 1 day already did when he got
1 day
arrested.
served.
And that he would be on probation for a year, and that the charges would be dropped to a Class A misdemeanor only. And so that was agreed upon with the landowner, and the landowner paid in full on everything. And
were you satisfied with that?
It helped. As far as satisfaction, I look at all the years that I lost out on the Banjo to competing. He was a young dog, 2 years old. But I was satisfied that justice was served, that a wrong was made right.
What do you think? Do you think it was more satisfying than if you would have gone ahead and charged into the man's yard and confronted him in his yard? And
hindsight looking back, because, but not knowing if you're going to get justice out of it.
Say you'd have gone up there and thumped him. I mean, just got your justice, hillbilly justice, right there in the front yard.
It was better that I did it the way I did it. Yeah, absolutely. And I could have ran over to him, but I knew that was trespassing. I knew in my heart if I stepped on that yard into that yard, I'm now trespassing. You got a guy standing out there with a pistol,
right?
And so I knew that I was.
Well, I'll put this out there. Cowardice has nothing to do with this. I know you. I've known you for a long time, and you're not a coward. So that has, for anybody that might be thinking, well, Brad was scared to go up there because he had a gun. No, Brad's got some common sense and understands. It's pretty amazing, really, that you had the wherewithal about you to realize as soon as I enter this yard and I get in a confrontation with this guy on his property, he's got a gun. There's some bad stuff that could happen here. And be bad for you, be bad. I mean, think about the trauma that could happen for your dad that was there with you. You've got a wife, you've got kids, you've got all this other stuff, and you chose to be calm enough that you backed out of it and believed in the system and let the system do the work. So anybody that would sit there and say, yeah, I'm going to go up in there whether he's got a gun or not, No, you're not. You're not. I'm just going to tell you right. No, you're not. And if you do, you're a fool.
Right.
So,
yeah, I agree. So, yeah, I mean, it would it's the worst nightmare that a coon hunter has to go through. And you wouldn't want that on any of your coon hunters or fellow hunters or anybody in that matter.
it was tragic the night you called me.
Yeah,
I was just like, because I'd remembered, at the time, now that you refresh my memory, I remember thinking that night, it's like, man, we just went through this with all these officers, and Brad was the guy that was playing the role of his dog just being shot, and I remembered how you played such a great role for those recruits and everything, and now here you are living this out for real, and it was an amazing thing. I want to talk about. Let's talk about a couple.
Let me interrupt you real quick. I just want to say that one of those recruits that was there that day is now my county game warden I live at now, and I'm good friends with him. I even went to his wedding, Chris Springston.
Oh, I wasn't a drill instructor for that class.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was there. He was one of the.
He participated that day. Yeah. One of the things. Let's talk about some key things that you did, and let's talk about the Garmin issue, because this is one of the things that I've told hunters over and over again. Keep track of that Garmin. That Garmin can be evidence for you in a situation like this. You can show where you turned loose, a dog loose on a piece of property that you had permission on, and whether it crossed property lines or it didn't cross property lines, or a landowner came across property lines, that is a piece of evidence that you need to make sure that you make available to your investigator. So tell us how you did that.
So, again, I can't remember who told me that GPS Garmin can be downloaded, and it may have been you, Chris. I don't know.
I don't know if I'm not going to take credit for that. So, I can't remember.
I can't remember. But anyways, I ended up doing it. I was able to get on the computer at home, and I'm not computer savvy, but I was able to do it. I was able to go on there and just follow the directions and pull up the tracks for that night. And I think I printed off 3 or 4 papers, and it showed where I started. It showed it said my dog's name on the tracks, all 3 of them, and it showed where we started in the woods, and they took it out of that cornfield and went to the backside of these 5 properties where they were taking the coon through, and it showed them going right up to that house, and the whole interaction. And so, yes, I was able to print the Garmin GPS dog tracks and was able to give that to the prosecutor. So, I mean, the prosecutor...
Did you give it to the prosecutor, or did you give it to Jeff?
I may gave it to Jeff, and then he gave it to the prosecutor. Yeah. Probably what happened. So, yeah, I mean, the prosecutor was armed with such hard facts that this was a cut and dry case. And that's one of the reasons that the plea bargain happened, and it was settled out of court. And had he went to court and been to trial, that Class D felony was going to stick.
Right. So we're going to cover this, and this, like I said, this is a 3-part series, and we talk about plea bargains with the attorney that's going to talk on this podcast. But just to get ahead of this, and you'll hear more of this later, but a plea bargain is not necessarily a bargain. It is an agreement that the parties come to resolve the issue at hand. Okay? So don't think anybody listening to this, don't think of a plea bargain as something that you had to settle for, Brad. You didn't have to settle for that. It's something that was the best resolution at the time for the case.
Yes, yeah. And so I just remembered that something I didn't do, I could have done. I could have took him to civil court and paid for pain and suffering. But I felt like what was agreed upon in the plea bargain was justice.
Yeah.
And I'm not out to get anybody.
Right.
But I'm just saying that civil lawsuits can be added on top of that for pain and suffering of what the party went through.
Yeah. So let's lay out the keys to success here. We'll start back from the beginning. And I think your story is amazing. You know, I'm glad your dad was there. But, okay, so you turn dogs loose. You're looking on your Garmin. You realize that those dogs are going towards some place that they probably shouldn't be. So you make a physical effort to get in a vehicle, to go around to intercept those dogs, intercept them, to make sure that they are safe, basically. And then after you hear the gunshots, so you've got an intentional act to make sure that you're keeping track of your dogs using your GPS. The second thing you do is you get around there, and after the incident, you hear the shots. You keep as cool a head as you possibly can. You don't enter the property. You don't confront the man directly. You might have verbally made a verbal exchange, but you backed out of there. You call law enforcement.
Yep.
And then you let the process work.
That's right. You know, one of the things that I don't think that a lot of people understand about coon hunters, when a coon dog comes onto property that it's not belonged on, and then people come out, they don't realize that we want to get our dogs back as much as they want the dogs off the property.
Right.
And that when our dog gets on property and tree a coon, when they do, it's about as fast as we can to get in there. Just like you said, you know, I drove around there as fast as I could to try to intercept because I knew they wasn't where they supposed to be.
Yeah.
And you know, I think
it is a sickening feeling. If your dogs are going towards something that's unknown, for me, it's sickening. I think, man, where do they? What's over there? What's going to happen? I need to get my hands on those dogs. I mean, I just pulled in a driveway the other night. Dogs crossed a road and got up on a hillside. I'd never talked to these people. I go to the door, knock on the door. The man came to the door with a Ruger 44 mag in his hand. I'm not lying. I'm serious. I'm standing there. I'm talking to this guy. And he's like, man, I don't know who's coming to my door at this time. And it wasn't late. It was only 8:30 at night, but it was dark. And I'm, who's beating on my door? And as soon as he realized what was happening, he laid the gun down. I'm not going to get crazy about that. I mean, he wasn't threatening me with the gun. He was just in possession of a gun. But, there's a lot of work to be done on our side as houndsmen. I've had numerous opportunities to stop in at that man's house. He's lived there for, 20 years. And I hunt across the road from his house. And usually we just go down the creek and tree some coons and come back out there. But, man, it'd take him 5 minutes to stop in there and talk to him and let him know what was going on.
One of the things I'd like to just really compliment you and Jerry Mull on is starting the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance and coming up with the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance posters that said, "Don't shoot my dog," where you just put them in gas stations and stuff to just grab the attention of somebody. What do you mean? What do you mean, don't shoot my dog? Oh, it could be a criminal offense. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That was a real great move on y'all's part, and we need to get back to it again. We need to keep educating, and like you said, I mean, what would have been the difference had I went down through there? I mean, my dad lives right there. 2 miles down the road. What would have been the difference had I just one day stop in each house and say, "Hey, my name's Brad. I just want you to know I coon hunt around here. And if you ever hear hound dogs coming through, just know they're the sweetest things in the world. And there ain't nothing to worry about. I'll be after my dog." Just, You're right, Chris. We could do a better job.
Saturday afternoon. Think of how many people we could contact on one Saturday afternoon. They're out doing yard work. You see them out. You swing in and say, "Hey,
And more than likely, they're going to share that information with other people they know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, you're always going to run into it. And anytime we've said it on this podcast a bunch, Brad, but if our dogs get off a piece of property where they're not supposed to be, there's one person that's really at fault. That's me.
Right.
When I turn that dog loose so you got to be humble, but there's a lot of stuff we can do on the front end of that to avoid a lot of this. But what would you tell somebody? What message do you want to get out there to the coon hunters? And this isn't, we've had bear hunters go through the same thing, all these things. What's something you'd want to tell houndsmen out there that might come into, unfortunately, they may have this same experience?
Yeah. So what's interesting is over the years since that happened, I've had probably a half dozen guys calling me that had their dogs shot because they would always refer back to me because we were the first successful prosecution case that was able to do that. And so one of the first things I asked him, I said, well, did you say anything to the property owner? Did you keep your cool? Did you call the law? And those are the things that I would say is say, look, guys, if the incident happens, nothing's going to bring that dog back. Nothing's going to change the situation. The best thing to do is the system does work, but we got to do it right. Keep a cool head. Don't even talk to the landowner. At that point, you need to walk away. Call your local conservation officer that your game warden that you hopefully have a relationship with. If the game warden doesn't show up, and a state trooper or a sheriff does, request a game warden. Then take this information that that dog is your property. Okay, that's my property, and that in Indiana it's a Class D felony to shoot a domesticated animal. I don't know how many law enforcement officers knows that.
Right.
Have them investigate that because now it becomes a different situation. It goes from it's a possible civil issue to now a criminal issue.
Can I speak on that just real quickly? So if you get a law enforcement officer that shows up, and even if you call a game warden, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to know what to do. But just simply tell them there's a crime that's been committed. I need you to investigate it. And if they want to say this is a civil case, then you need to talk to their supervisors. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't go in and talk to the chief tomorrow. Don't go in and talk to the sheriff. You need to preserve that scene as a crime scene right now. So if that law enforcement officer is trying to pass the buck or not do their job or trying to get down to the speedway to have a cup of coffee with his buddies, you need to make sure that you talk to that sheriff that night. I want to talk to your supervisors. I need to talk to your supervisor right now. And be persistent, be polite, but be persistent. And if they're not, then call 911 back and say, hey, I've got a police officer here who doesn't not want to do his job. I need to talk to his supervisor. He won't seem to contact him. You can do it. That's totally within your rights to do it. Most police officers are going to do their job. Again, it's just a deal where you walk into this situation. It's not shooting a coon dog isn't something that happens every day, So most law enforcement officers aren't going to know really what they need to do, but you need to break it down for them. This is my property. He shot it. It's no different than if it was a cow, whether it was anything else, let's investigate this. And they'll be like, some lights will start going off then. Yeah. They really will.
Yeah. So I want to touch on real quick about how the prosecutor, Mike Mahoney, and myself came to a price.
A value. Good. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to cover that with you.
A banjo. And because that had to be determined. And so we provided a list of the receipts of all his winnings. We shared the value of his pedigree and the possibility of what he could have produced in puppies or stud fees. We talked about the value of the fact that he was qualified for the PKC World Hunt that year, and that he lost out on possibly winning $30,000.
Right.
The value that of the gas and time that I have spent taking him to all the competition hunts that he was already in. I mean, all those things came into factor to determine a reasonable value of the dog. And
reasonable is the key.
Yes, it is reasonable. You can't get stupid. You can't go in there and say my dog worth $30,000 because he could have won $30,000. So you work out a reasonable value. And again, I just want to say, I had a letter sent to me by somebody after that all happened, and saying that I was wrong to sue the landowner that shot my dog. And what these people failed to realize that sent me this letter, there was no lawsuit involved. This was the plea bargain.
Well, the thing is, people are ignorant. I mean, and I'm not saying they're stupid. I'm saying they're ignorant.
Right.
They make emotional. They react emotionally to situations that they don't know anything about. I see it all the time. I saw it as a law enforcement officer. I see it as running this podcast. I see people that reach out and make statements and make assumptions about things that they have no clue about. But the thing you said that impressed me, Brad, is you said what was fair. Okay, what was a fair evaluation? When you get this settlement, when a and Aaron will talk about this, but everybody's dog is priceless. Really.
Right.
I mean, they're all priceless.
Right.
If it's my dog and I've put this much time into it, he can never be replaced again.
Right.
It can't happen. But the law doesn't care about what you think. It's what is the actual value of that. And you have to come up to something that you said is fair, just, and reasonable. Yeah. What is the reasonable price for this dog? And you guys came to that. And in your day, what year was this? It was
2009.
2009. We're talking about 12 years ago.
Yeah.
12 years ago that this happened. Inflation's kicked in a little bit since then.
That's right. Especially now.
If it was this day and age, we could add a lot more to that. But at the time, I remember when you got awarded that restitution, I was like, yes, that finally, that sounds fair and just. It was a pretty good chunk, but it didn't replace anything.
Right.
However, it was just and it was reasonable.
Yep. So in the state of Indiana, I do believe that theft or destruction of property that is valued over $4,000 or more, it may somewhere in there, it becomes a felony too. Mm-hmm. Each state would be different.
I don't know what the dollar amount is anymore, but yeah. So it's called criminal mischief. Anytime that you destroy property belonging to somebody, if it's up to a certain amount, it's a misdemeanor. If it goes over that amount, it's a felony.
Right. And so, that comes into play too,
mm-hmm.
because your dog is your personal property.
Yep.
And so, I mean, there's a lot of factors in all that.
Right.
And so, I mean, I just feel really thankful and blessed that I was a part of the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance that taught me a lot, having that role play a few weeks or 10 days prior.
Can you imagine? That is amazing.
That is just mind-boggling. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This, just went over this. And so if you look at it, well, like Brad had the upper hand. Yes, I did. But guys, I did it because I got active with my hunting organization. I didn't sit on the sidelines. And if everybody would get active, we could have some awesome hunting organizations out there. I started the Central Indiana Coon Hunters Association in 2003 from my home to live out in the country in Danville. And, it everybody can do something. and get involved with your Indiana Coon Hunters Association, your state organizations, or start an organization like the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance.
If you don't have one, start it.
Pardon me?
I say if you don't have one, start one.
That's right. And so, am I correct in saying that Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance is the one that was pushed for the law to be changed of Class D felony for shooting a domesticated animal, or I'm sorry, no, we helped change the law to extend the hunting season, the running season.
We also were involved in the domesticated animal law.
Yes.
Yep.
Right. And so
to get it raised to a felony level.
Right. And so, I know they did that. I know we did extending the hunting season from January 31st to come back in for February 1st for dog running season. Instead of waiting 2 weeks until it used to be February 15th.
Hey, we need to revive the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance. It sounds like you're running for president, Brad.
Oh, no. I've done my time.
Hey, we need to wrap this one up, but because we're going to go coon hunting for a little bit. And I appreciate you coming down and man, what a story. Yeah. What a story. And kudos to you, Brad, for a lot of things. I mean, 1, getting involved, 2, keeping a cool head, 3, being patient, and, you did all the right things here. And that's why I wanted to share your story with everybody, that the system isn't against you, but you have to understand the system in order for it to work properly. And this story shows people that the system can work properly when you understand it and you do the right things.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Kudos to you, Brad.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate your hospitality, Chris.
I appreciated your friendship all these years,
you
Brad.
Too.
Seriously. So, guys, I'm going to sign off on this podcast. And until next time, Brad, you follow your hounds and I'll follow mine.
You bet it. Thank you.
All right.